Hello, this is Mark Layton from the Oregon Files podcast. Today's special episode, we visit Wildlife Safari. Wildlife Safari opened in 1972, and 50 years later, the safari park has grown into an internationally recognized nonprofit wildlife park with over 600 acres of space for some of the rarest, most endangered, and simply coolest species on Earth to roam. Wildlife Safari's mission is to provide the highest quality interaction with wildlife to inspire lifelong commitments to conservation, education, and the preservation of native and exotic species. They maintain the highest standards in the zoological community through the accreditation with the Zoological Association of America and the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, a designation that fewer than 10% of animal parks in the country can claim. Today, annual attendance to the park reaches over 200,000 individuals. Wildlife Safari is a registered 501c3 nonprofit organization and receives no local, state, or federal tax funding. Learn how you can support the mission of Wildlife Safari by visiting wildlifesafari.net. Thank you and enjoy. Hello, and welcome to the Oregon Files podcast. First, our disclaimer. We are amateur podcasters simply for entertainment. If we misquote or offend, it was not on purpose to do so. Now, today is our special episode because today we are on location at Wildlife Safari with Mr. Dan Brands. First, my co-host, Elliot Bowman.
Thank you so much, Mark. You have that memorized now?
Yes.
That's fantastic, sir. A quick shout out also to our new friend, Aaron at the Umpqua Valley Farm to School. We thank you so much for sitting down with us. That was an awesome to get to know her. Hope everyone is enjoying their February. We're getting a little sneak peek into spring with nice days like yesterday and today. And nice days kind of want us to be outside, especially at places like the Wildlife Safari where you can walk around the village. And, you know, the safari is a really cool place because every time I come here, you know, park in the parking lot, you see license plates from around, not just from, you know, Oregon and California, Washington, but you see license plates from all over the country. So we're really excited to sit down with, we're already sitting down, but with Dan here and get to knowing him and what he does and, you know, finding out more about the Wildlife Safari and everything. So, sir, would you mind just telling us a little about yourself and
well,
who you
first
are?
put in a disclaimer here is even though you see, you know, different license plates, there's a lot of people that actually come from overseas to Wildlife Safari. And we've seen a lot of people from Asia specifically, and we've asked, well, what brings you to Wildlife Safari? And it's because we lie between Crater Lake and the coast, and we're halfway in between. So we're a great stopover from a lot of internationals that are coming through. Okay. And so we make a great stopover, you know, give the kids a break, get out of the car and visit the Wildlife Safari. And so, not only are we, you know, nationally throughout the entire United States, but internationally as well. So here in the park. About myself, I am a father of two growing young boys. One's about to graduate high school and the other one's about to graduate college. So my wife and I are soon to be empty nesters. So we're looking forward to the new transition into life here. And I have been in the animal field. Well, I've been in the animal field almost my entire life. I grew up a city kid, but my grandparents were farmers on both sides of the family, dairy farmers specifically. So I've spent a lot of time getting up at 4 a.m. to milk cows in the morning. Probably developed my love of animals from that. And I've actually been in the zoo field for 26 years now and really enjoy it. Been here at Wildlife Safari for the last 17 years and we moved out here from the Midwest and it's been a fun voyage.
Very cool. My daughter's also about to graduate high school too, so I can see the senioritis in her eyes every day. So I totally get
it's coming quick.
Yes. So when did you come out here to Oregon?
Well, I came out here in 2007. Wildlife Safari was struggling at that time. They just had some bad management and were looking for some new energy bringing in there. And so they hired Dan Venslake, who's my boss, and he started in January and I started in May. He hired me for the animal side of the business, which was my specialty, and kind of rolled up our sleeves and really just kind of started triaging the park. You know, what were the priorities that really needed our attention first? And then we were able to kind of work forward as to less and less of that. And so, you know, in 2007, we came in the park, they were having a hard time meeting payroll. They were $4 million in debt. So it took a lot of time to get the park into the black. And then even better yet is we are debt free today. So
wow, that's awesome.
We're just getting into our busy season. You know, you guys are out here. It's President's Day today. Right. It's hustling and bustling out there. It's kind of a preemptive to spring break, which is just around the corner, which is when we kind of refer to it as opening the floodgates. We go from very few people here to all of a sudden there's just a ton of people out here, and we're kind of baptizing everybody by fire because we've just hired them all on. We keep telling them there's crowds coming, just be prepared. And they think we're joking until spring break hits, and then all of a sudden, we're full force into it. Hopefully everybody's well trained and well versed on where they need to be, and so it's coming up quickly.
Right. So you're the curator, is that right?
I'm the curator. So like a curator of a museum, I curate our collection here at Wildlife Safari. The only difference is our collection lives, breathes, eats, sleeps, poops. And so we've got to make sure that they're cared for well here at the park. And so I work with our animal care staff who are out there doing the cleaning, and our veterinary staff who take care of the health side of it. But then I also deal with other facilities throughout the United States, and we look at moving animals from facility to facility because we don't manage our collections necessarily here at Wildlife Safari because it would be genetically detrimental if we only just bred the animals here at Safari. But we're looking at, so like cheetahs is our flagship species here at Wildlife Safari. So we work with 8 other zoos that are breeding facilities, and we determine which animals are most genetically valuable to breed with each other, and we move them across the United States all the time. So we've always got cheetahs moving here, there, and everywhere. And so we've got 8 main breeding centers, but then obviously every AZA accredited facility out there that has cheetahs is somehow tied into all this program that we pull in animals in and out of for the breeding program.
Man.
So it's a very much a balancing act, especially when...
Yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah.
We've got over 600 animals in the park, pushing 100 different species. And so it's a lot of stuff to manage every day.
Walk us through like a day in being a curator's life here.
Well, I could say what my normal day should be, but unfortunately, the days I have a whole thing planned out, it's never the same. It's life goes crazy.
Yeah.
Our lives revolve around the animals here at the park, and so our day is dictated by whatever may be coming down the road. A typical day here for an animal keeper is they're going to come in, they're going to do their initial rounds, check on other animals, make sure that they're in good shape, make sure the caging is in great shape. Then they start the cleaning process and the feeding process. And of course, depending on an animal's dietary needs, we're going to feed according to that. Some animals require to eat multiple times during the day. Others, we just, like in the drive-through, we fill the hay feeders and drop pellets one time a day, and they're good until tomorrow. Probably the biggest one is we had seahorses here for a while, and they require to be fed every few hours because
seahorses?
They have no stomachs, so they have to constantly be eating to maintain their metabolism.
I eat like a seahorse.
What do seahorses eat?
Primarily a lot of krill shrimp. You just buy these little shrimp and you just feed them in there and keep them going that way. But like I said, it was every 4 hours we were feeding them again. And so that was very time intensive when we had them here in the park for a few years.
Yeah. So before the Wildlife Safari, what other kind of safaris or zoos did you work at?
I came from the Great Plains Zoo in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which is a small city zoo, a city owned. It was privately managed by the Zoological Society of Sioux Falls. And pretty much doing the same thing, only it was in a small zoo setting. A little bit easier managing because we're managing, 2 zebra and 3 rhinos and 4 giraffe and maybe 5 monkeys. But here we're managing huge herds of animals that are all intermingling together out there. And so it provides a little more of a challenge, a little more creative thinking on how we manage the collections here at Wildlife Safari. And it's fun.
I got to imagine you probably grow attached to a lot of the animals too, right?
You can. People often ask what my favorite animal in the park, and it's usually the animal that's giving me the most challenge right now. What am I researching? What am I having to really spend a lot of time and thought and effort into that animal species? So those tend to be the ones that are, higher on the list at that time.
What would the answer be today?
Well, today I grew up being a primate and bird keeper, so I tend to be always partial to those. That's where I tend to go. Still, one of my favorite monkeys is the colobus monkey. We don't have them here at Wildlife Safari, but that is a dream species I'd love to go back and work with.
Okay. What do you go to college for to kind of become like a curator of?
Well, actually, this wasn't what I really was planning to do with my life. Okay. It was one of those things I fell into and just fell in love with it. I always knew I wanted to work with animals, and I went to college. I was going to be a veterinarian. So I did the pre-vet coursework, and then of course you find a young lady and you fall in love and you get married, and then in the process
story.
Not that I ever gave up the dream of being a veterinarian, but in the process I did an internship because I wanted to finish my undergrad and I needed a few credits yet, so I did an internship at the Great Plains Zoo and just fell in love. I'm like, this is what I really want to do the rest of my life, and never left.
That's awesome,
man. That is so cool.
So did they seek you out, or did you apply for a position here?
Here at Wildlife Safari? I applied for the position here. A friend of mine had known about this place and had been through here quite a bit. And when he heard that they were hiring for a director and for a curator, he really said, hey, if you're really looking for a challenge, Wildlife Safari, I think we'll give you the challenge you're looking for and really, let you spread your wings a little bit. And so
no pun
it was a little tough because my wife and I are both from the Midwest. We left family back in Minnesota and Iowa, and we moved out here with just our two boys back then, and but we've fallen in love with Wildlife Safari. I love the atmosphere and how we manage the animals here, and of course when you grow up in the plains of Iowa and Minnesota and all you see are cornfields every day. Right. Now I wake up, I look out, I see mountains and trees, and
absolutely.
I don't have to shovel snow usually, saying that what's happening tomorrow, but
the forecast, nothing compared to, I'm sure, to Minnesota.
Correct. I don't have to shovel it every day or go out and warm the car up and to be able to get to work, or wondering if I can get to work in the morning.
Now I grew up in the Northeast, so I definitely know about the winter time very much so. Programs at the Wildlife Safari, as far as would you guys kind of run all year round?
So the cheetah's a big one, because you guys are national or globally known for the cheetah program.
We're open almost every day of the year, so we're open every day except for Christmas and Thanksgiving are the only 2 days we are actually closed here at Wildlife Safari. Oh, wow. Cheetahs is our key flagship species here at the park. Primarily, a lot of that has to do with the fact that Lori Marker, who is well known in cheetah conservation, started her career here at Wildlife Safari before she went over to Namibia and Africa and started developing her conservation program, Cheetah Conservation Fund over there. And so that's kind of what really put Wildlife Safari on the map. Mm-hmm. So we've always had a lot of cheetahs. We've always had a lot of space for cheetahs. We call it cheetah TV, as our cheetahs they butt up against our hoofstock pens. So they see this multitude of food out there.
Right.
But I think a lot of the success has to do with the lack of stress. In small zoos and stuff, the cheetahs are up close to people. They're hearing a lot of that. Where when we get into the breeding situation, you can see cheetahs here at the park, and we'll always see cheetahs. We have a lot of them. They're in our drive-through. But when it comes time to breed those animals, we move them to a remote location so that they're away from all of that hustle and bustle. And of course, we've even done studies on that where they take cortisone levels of an animal, looking at cortisone in the blood, which is a significant test for stress in an animal. And our animals are showing very little cortisone in their blood.
That's awesome.
Compared to a normal zoo setting where they're quite elevated, and sometimes to the point where they're concerned about the detriment of that animal. And part of that may be these people are in their cars, so they're confined, and the cheetahs aren't having to deal with that. But sometimes people wonder if the cars are a detriment, but according to the cortisol tests that we're doing, is that actually is not an issue for us.
That's good to know, actually. Yeah.
And cheetahs, they had babies recently too, right?
Yeah.
There was a new set of
we've had another set of babies. They're just coming out of their huts in the last couple of weeks, and so some people might get a glimpse, some might not, because it depends on when you come through and if they're out exploring or not. Cheetah babies recently. We have tiger cubs that were born this winter that are out and playing with mom and dad, and so they're getting big too, but they're fun to watch out there. And so there's always something going on in here. And of course, we're coming into spring, so now the hoofstock will start, dropping their calves out there in the drive-through soon. And so we're pretty excited about that. And so it's always a fun time to come out in the spring and see what's new, because every day is a change. And actually coming through the park, you go through once and you'll see one thing, and you come back through a second time, and the animals have all moved and they're interacting with different animals in the park. They're in different locations. So it's a whole new experience no matter when you're coming through.
I remember when the bears used to be out, you can drive through before they were enclosed years ago.
Yes, that was one of my first core memories. Was we drove through with the bears, and we drove all the way from really far out in Glide. So it was during a hot summer day, And the bears were so excited for the car that was coming through. It was my uncle's car. The bears were licking all the bugs off the front bumper. Yep. It was so funny because one bear literally got on top of the hood. I was like, no, you're not moving. I'm going to lick this thing clean.
Those may have been great memories. They also caused me great headaches when you're sitting there from an insurance standpoint going, that just isn't safe.
Right. Is that why they kind of stopped doing that?
Yeah, it helped with the insurance to be able to start separating the animals away from the vehicles. And honestly, it made for a better experience to separate them because so often we had vehicles and there was staff that would move the animals away from the vehicles when they would try to keep them as far away. Where now that we've got them in behind fence, you can actually have an opportunity where the animals get to be fairly close and more viewable than what we've allowed in the past when we did have that free interaction happening out there.
So I meant to ask this a little bit ago, but when you interviewed for Wildlife Safari, were there animals involved, like in the interview?
I did what was called I did 2 interviews. So I did one was a phone interview because I was back in the Midwest. So that was my first interview. And then I was asked to come out for a working interview. Yeah. So I came out and spent 3 days out here, rolling up my sleeves, working with the staff. So getting to know the staff, getting to work with the animals out here. So it was definitely a hands-on experience in the process.
Man.
The animals have to approve it.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, we like Dan. He's
The ostriches have their own meetings. Like, okay, we approve of Dan. Any favorite stories over the years of working here, or things that stand out in your mind? Like,
there's always things that stand out. One of them actually predates me. It's kind of a folklore story that has true reality behind it. But back in the day, in the early days of the park, the hippos weren't confined to the area they are now, and so staff would come in, and depending on which way the fence was laying, they would know whether the hippos were in the wetlands just below the park, or if they were back in the park, and they needed to look for them there. Well, one fateful night, our maintenance guy got a call from the Douglas County Sheriff Department and said, "Hey, we want to let you know that your hippos are running downtown Winston right now." And our maintenance guy goes, "Well, how do you know there are hippos?"
I love it.
How do you round up hippos?
That part of the story has never been shared with me. I'm assuming they came back on their own, but
that's amazing.
Well, we've got our ambassador program where we take cheetahs out to schools and stuff. And when Lori Marker was here, actually there were things where they'd go out to the football field and they would have a cheetah race against a runner out there and stuff like that.
That's wild.
So there were stuff where there was some off leash stuff, that stuff that you could get away with way back. Now today there's a lot of regulation and laws about what you can and cannot do, but we still, to this day, do take cheetahs off-site. Obviously, they're on leash, and we've got multiple leashes on them and a lot of staff people around them. But we still have that opportunity where we take those out to schools or, area fundraisers, and we talk about cheetahs and their conservation status. And it's a fun program. And, there's nothing better than when you do that is people make a connection with that animal. So when they make that connection, now they want to help conserve that animal. And so it makes for a much better story, much better reaction when they've made those connections.
Mm-hmm. Do you have other zoos and wildlife conservatories come here and kind of take notes of what you guys are doing?
We sure do. We have, when we do send cheetahs out to other facilities, it's not uncommon for them to come and spend a few days with us prior to us moving the cheetahs out there. This winter, we actually had an opportunity where we hosted a cheetah husbandry course out here with AZA. So we had people from all over the United States, from lots of different zoos. I think there was almost 30 people here.
Wow.
All just coming to learn about cheetah husbandry and their care. And so it was taught by a variety of different people from other facilities, but the hands-on stuff was here at Wildlife Safari.
So important.
Can ostriches fly?
Ostriches are too big to fly. So we've got all the rat tights that we have here in the park. We've got the ostrich, the rhea, and the emu. We do not have the cassowaries, thank goodness. But none of those birds can fly.
I like the rheas. So I don't know why. Just been a rhea.
They're spooky eye. No, it's actually the emus have the kind of the beady demon eyes, but the rheas are always just kind of flighty and running around.
And no more. They weren't. What kind of camel ride is?
Or gibbons?
Gibbons, yeah.
Yeah, we still have gibbons. They're out in the drive-through.
Okay.
We've expanded our lemur collection here in the village areas, so they've taken over that island, and the gibbons have gone out to Asia. We actually have one of our islands is under construction right now. We're building a brand new building out there for them, and so the gibbons will soon be going over there. Nice. We're fundraising for the second facility right now, which is a second island we have out there. So we're going to shift from one, rebuild the other, and then we'll bring in some more.
That's cool.
More gibbons here at the park.
I like gibbons. You're a gibbon fan?
Yeah, I love the gibbons. I love the primates.
I could probably watch them all day. I think they're so dang
Gibbons, I live in Winston, and on a very quiet morning, I can actually hear the Gibbons calling in Winston.
Yeah.
Most people probably don't know what they are, but I'll be laying in bed going, here's my Gibbons this morning.
Now, do they know, do they have like names like Larry, Moe, and Curly, like that kind of names? Like, do you just...
They sure do. Yeah. The staff do what we call operant conditioning, which is a training process. We ask them for basic behaviors so that we can do full body exams on them, or one of the things we're doing now is, asking the tigers and lions for their tails so that we can do blood draws without having to tranquilize them, because we have to go through that procedure. It's a lot more stressful. Wow. But if we can draw blood without having to go through all that process, and they're offering us their tail, it's so much healthier for the animal, and we're getting results with a lot less stress involved in it. And so it's one of those things we can do more often that way too, and to assess health of the animal collection.
And do they know their names? You know how like my dog knows their names.
I guess where I was going with that is, yes, they will know their names, because obviously when you have 5 lions in a pen, they all have a specific name and know where they have to. That's awesome. Have to come.
The lions have to be probably one of the most popular attractions, right?
Believe it or not, I think we have this conversation frequently here at Wildlife Safari. What exactly is the most would be people's favorite? I think obviously because we're Wildlife Safari, cheetahs tend to be one at the top of the list. Giraffe tend to be a very top second. Yeah. And then I would say probably elephants.
Oh, that's
then
right.
Then we probably bounce back to lions, and that'll change here and there over time. But if I were to make a guess, and we survey the guests here in the park today, that's probably about the order you'd find them in.
That's amazing how many different types of animals you guys have out here.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're in the middle. Amazing. We're in Winston, Oregon. You know, it's like you wouldn't even really know it's here unless you just knew it was here and you just took.
Well, I've had people that have lived here.
Pretty incredible.
When I move in and they're down the block, and we'll get to talking, and he's like, "Oh, you work at that place with the cheetahs?" Like, we've got so much more than just cheetahs up there, you know. Right. Well, I've lived here 5 years and I've never made it up there.
Yeah.
And they just don't know what really is up here until they get up and see it and visit it, and then it's word of mouth is probably one of our best advertisers for it, because it is such an amazing. I was just talking to somebody the other day at the theater, and they were telling me, I've only ever been through the village area. What else is there to do at the park? And I'm like,
oh man,
okay,
you're missing
a whole huge section if you're not going past the village area.
Right.
So
yeah.
One of the programs that you guys partake in, and I think it's absolutely phenomenal, is Camp Millennium.
Yep.
Elle and I have volunteered there for a couple of years now, and we do, volunteer to help make sure that extra help while they're here. They allow busloads of those kids to come in and spend a couple hours at the park, and that's just an awesome experience.
Yeah. In the past, we've loaned them at least a space of land here for they could do their annual fundraiser where they do the pumpkin patch in October. I think they're moving that to another location, or they're going to be doing something different for their fundraising here in the future. But during the summer, then when they do offer their camps for these kids, we allow them to come out here to Wildlife Safari for a full day, and we just kind of give them the grand tour. We let them go do all of our animal encounters, and they just have a great time while they're out here. We do that one for Camp Millennium. We do what's called Dream Night, which is a night for families with terminally ill children. So we don't know if they're going to be here next year. Yeah. And so we open up a whole evening for them to come out to the park free of charge. We give them pizza, and we throw a little carnival for them that night. And that's really good for the families, and we do it for the full family too, because so often the other kids in the family are being forgotten about when they're caring for the sick child, and it's a great time for everybody to just come back. And we've had parents that just thank us, saying today was the first day we haven't thought about why we're in the situation we're in, and so it's heartbreaking when you hear those kind of stories. We do another day. It's called Day of Discovery, which is for handicapped individuals throughout the entire state of Oregon to come in and spend a day in here, and we do some activities as well for them. Nice. So they come through. I think this year we had like 1,200 signups for that day that came through the park.
Wow. 1,200 signups.
So those are opportunities that we do offer here in the park. We have summer camps for all the kids in Douglas County to come out, participate in summer camps and day camps throughout the season. And all those things can be found on our website to take a part of those wonderful opportunities.
I bet the summer camps are a lot of fun.
They are. My kids went through the summer camp program here. They've enjoyed it. I know a lot of people, and it's just another opportunity to see, kind of get those backdoor scenes of what it is to be an animal keeper here at Wildlife Safari.
So Wildlife Safari started in the 1970s, is that right?
1972, they opened their doors. So we are in our 50th year of business this year.
Oh, wow.
Well, actually, that was last year.
Yeah.
But They opened their doors in 1972. They actually had a grand opening in 1972, and they turned around and did another grand opening in 1973.
Oh, really?
So it could still be in our 50th year, to be honest.
We'll count it.
Yeah.
Just depends on what year you want to go off the grand opening. They opened their doors. Unfortunately, they opened their doors just as the oil embargo started. And so a drive-through park kind of struggled those first few years as they were trying to get on their feet, as people were trying to figure out how to put gas in their vehicles. But they survived. It was a for-profit business back when it first opened in 1972, really? And then in early 1980s, somewhere in there, they rolled over to a nonprofit, as we know it today. So it started off as World Wildlife Safari Park, and now it's Wildlife Safari Park.
I didn't know that.
I didn't either. So when it first opened, what was kind of like the main focus as far as like animals?
It was the drive-through was the main focus. Mm-hmm. So the village area that we're in right now wasn't really part of the original thought. But the idea was from Frank Hart, who was the founder of the park. His idea was he knew that a lot of people from this area, Douglas County, would never get to go to Africa and see animals over in Africa. And he was actually an avid hunter, and he got to see some of these animals in Africa when he was over there hunting. But he became very passionate about cheetah conservation. And so that's why cheetahs became our flagship species. And that's one of the first animals that were actually brought into the park, because he was really passionate about it and really put all of his energy and effort into conserving animals and giving people the opportunity in Douglas County to see these animals they probably would never get to see in their entire lifetime.
That's interesting. I can't imagine there was a lot of, I don't know, maybe there was in the early 1970s, a lot of animal conservationists in the United States.
It was really kind of on the start of, because zoos, when they first opened, were nothing more than come see the oddities of the world type of attraction. So that, the museum background really fit with that, or private collections where, people were collecting animals left and right. And so, when you started in the 1980s is really when they started saying, hey, there's some animals here that need to really have some conservation status. And so, Wildlife Safari was just probably one of the early ones on that board, especially with wanting to conserve cheetahs that have been one of the more delicate species out there in the park. So the park was built based around the drive-through portion of it. The restaurant where it sits today was actually to look over an African water hole is what it was designed to be, to draw the animals in while people were sitting there eating, and the animals would come into a water hole. But then they realized that there was so much more that could be done with it, so they started expanding the walk-through area, which is the small animals that you can't just let run out and drive through. They'd get lost out there. So that's where that started to expand out, and it really didn't work the way Frank had envisioned it, because most of the animals used the water hole in the night.
Oh, how funny.
If you go on the backside of the restaurant and you look up, there's actually big spotlights built on the back of the restaurant that were there to illuminate this water hole, but that part never came together. So they expanded the village area to incorporate more of the animals that people wouldn't normally get to see in the drive-through. And so
interesting. It's interesting that he went to Africa to do hunting, and then I don't know, he had a change of heart, or he just saw something in the cheetahs that he wanted to save, and I don't know, that's fascinating.
I had an opportunity to visit with Frank. He was still alive when I arrived at the park, but he did pass away that first summer I was here. So I didn't have a whole lot of conversation with him as to some of his early thoughts in the park. But he definitely was passionate about that, and lots of wonderful stories that go along with how the park was created and how animals came into the park. And
I love it. The parks, you guys close at 4:00 usually each day? Is that what I saw?
Well, we do. That's our winter hours right now. So from 9 to 4, coming up here in March, we'll rotate. We actually will close at 6:00. A lot of that has to do with just staff being able to get their jobs done during daylight hours. So, but as the daylight hours start to extend, then we'll extend our operating hours to 6.
Do you have a whole second staff that stays here at night to make sure the animals are taken care of?
We do have people here overnight. Most of the work happens during the daylight because for safety purposes. But we do have people here all night long to make sure things are going good and safe here up in the park. So
that's probably a popular shift, right?
And if you're the curator, you're on call 24/7. So there's been a lot of times I'm here in the middle of the night too.
Really? You just get calls at 2 or 3 in the morning to come on down?
I have, it's less and less of that because I have staff that I trust and do a great job of what they're supposed to be doing. But not so much here in Sioux Falls where we had heavy winters. There was often times where I'd be coming in and resetting, furnaces in a building because they've gone out on a 20-degree day and the temperature alarms are going off at 4:00 in the morning or something like that. But we've had animals, shipments come in at 4:00 in the morning, and we've got to get them off the truck because they've been in crates for how long, and for their well-being, we want to get them out and on their feet and out of those crates. So we've And, sometimes we have to get them on airlines early in the morning too. And we've got to have them up to Portland. And so sometimes we're loading at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning to get them out of here.
Ostriches can't fly though. Remember
that?
Yeah,
they can't fly. So
All right. This is probably a dumb question, but where do the most animals sleep? Like
in their beds.
In their bed, like.
I was thinking the same question too.
But they
don't have like a
do the hippos do they know it's like time to go to bed and they're like, okay, we got to go like in our little house now?
Most of our animals out in the drive-through, most of those animals, I mean, they're plains animals. That's where they're most comfortable, and so they just
sleep where they.
We've got shelters out there, and some of the shelters have heat, and they always have the food in the shelters. So. If I come in late at night and I go through the drive-thru, I'm going to find them probably congregating in some of those shelters. Things like the hippo and the rhinos, giraffe, and elephants all have specific barns for them that are heated. The rhinos and the hippos have free access all night long, but chances are as the temperatures start to cool down at night, they actually move into their barns, and we'll find them in those barns at night. And actually, our staff, specifically with the rhinos, can do all their training last thing before they go home at night and the first thing in the morning, because the rhinos will still be in the barn at that point. Giraffe, because they have some temperature sensitivities, we bring them in every night. They have temperature guidelines that we follow here at the park, and then elephants obviously come in. During the winter, they come in the summer, we'll let them roam around out in their paddocks all night long.
So do the animals...
So many questions.
Okay, so the African, like you get an elephant and they see snow for the first time. Right. I was, what's the reaction? Like, what is this?
They stick their tongue out, like catching snowflakes.
So the elephants here in the park are 40 years old, so it's not like they've seen snow for the first time ever. But they'll experience new things just like everybody else, and they'll, it was, I can't remember what it was called. It was something like flat. Everybody knows what a flat Stanley is, but this one was particularly with a stuffed rabbit. And we brought it to the elephants because I thought, we'll get a picture of this rabbit with the elephants. Well, the elephants, that was something new they'd never seen, was this stuffed animal. And so, they're carefully touching it with their trunk, and then they would trumpet and they take off running across the yard. And was like, wow, this is interesting enrichment for them. So there are things that they do experience. You'll see it every snowfall across the United States. They'll build snowmen for the rhinos to attack and knock over, and it's part of their enrichment. But those are great things because in a zoo setting, is these animals aren't having to forage for their food because it's being provided for them. They're not having to worry about predation because they're in safe locations, so they're not having to worry about that stuff. So some of the stuff is to stimulate the animals in their mental capacities as well. Right. So we like to offer them new things and challenge them with a variety of things. So a snowfall out there is always, that's one of those natural things that occurs, and we don't have to do something that day.
Right.
But a lot of times with the big cats, we'll offer cheap cologne. We'll spray cologne in the exhibits because it's a new scent. So they'll go in there and they'll smell that, and they're like, "What's that?" And they'll start peeing on trees. And scent marking to cover it up.
That's
and so we're eliciting natural behaviors, but stuff that, if they're in their cage and they just keep smelling themselves every day, it doesn't elicit anything. But if we start to affect their environment, now all of a sudden they're like, something changed overnight. What's different out here?
I had no idea. That is really
That
cool.
would probably be the most fun thing to do, is finding new ways to keep the animals entertained, but
enriched. We call it animal enrichment.
Yeah.
And now we've even taken that a step further in the last few years, is we're talking about animal welfare. Is what is animal welfare? And how do we measure animal welfare? And, how do you determine if an animal is
happy?
Can you say happy? That's the things we struggle with. But how do you content? Are they getting all the things in life that they need? Are they being mentally stimulated? Are they well cared for? So those are the things we've been challenging ourselves the last few years, is how we look at that and really move forward. And it's been a struggle because like you said, is that zebra truly happy out there, or is that zebra just a zebra
just standing there?
Right.
So, well, you were saying earlier, I mean, them not being stressed out too is really important, right? I mean, them, that probably goes along with being content, is not being stressed too. So I mean, you can.
Well, there can be healthy stress too in some circumstances. I know personally myself, if there's I'm not developing enough.
Sure.
If I've been laying on the couch and I'm not doing anything, it leads to a lethargic life too. So that there is good stress as well.
That's true.
Go to the gym, stress yourself out on the the barbells or something.
Right. So where do I keep going back to this. So the giraffes, when you bring them into how tall is the giraffe? Do they sit when they sleep? Are they stand and sleep?
A giraffe is going to spend most of its time on its feet. It may lay down for, I think the average is 10 to 15 minutes that they'll actually spend on the ground.
Wow.
But they have to exert so much energy going from a prone position to under their feet that they
Right.
become, they're more susceptible to predation when they're on the ground.
Yeah.
So they will stay on their feet most of the time. So seeing a giraffe lay down is a rare occasion.
Okay.
I mean, you'll see it in captivity probably more often than not. But yeah, a giraffe is 18 feet tall, so the barn has to be 18 feet tall.
Okay.
Pull a giraffe to walk into the barn
Yeah.
and not hit his head. And they've got to be able to, do their full extensions and stuff. So
Yeah.
we have minimum requirements for what their holding cells need to look
That's
like.
awesome.
And
So how close are like the giraffes to like the elephants to like the rhinos? Like, do they all kind of like talk to each other? Like,
Hey,
well, they
Hey, how was
can.
your
I
day?
mean, the
Type of
giraffe and the
deal?
rhinos share the same barn. I mean, they're not in the same room.
Sure,
but they're
yeah.
in the same barn.
Yeah.
So they see each other. The giraffe and rhinos actually used to be out in the same area
Right, I
together.
remember that.
Right now, there's just a wire fence between the two,
Right.
so they can definitely do nose to nose.
And they communicate at all like that? Like they acknowledge each other? Like,
I think they'll acknowledge. We've got some of my favorite. One of my favorite photos is actually of the giraffe leaning down into the hippo enclosure.
Oh.
And the hippo's got his mouth wide open.
I love
and,
the dang hippos.
The first thing you're like is, oh, that
Yeah.
giraffe's going to get chomped.
Yeah.
But then, you just realize that the two are just smelling each other and checking each other out.
I
Right.
love that.
you have to remind me of the hippo's name. It starts with a T. Because I looked at like every day they used to put something on Instagram. It was like, not Tony. But
Yeah, no, they've got Tony.
Tony,
and,
okay. So, yeah, it was
Tony
yeah.
is one, and
But
oh
Tony
my
was
gosh.
pretty popular. They would put photos out like every
Yes.
Tony Tuesday or something like that.
Yeah.
And I just
he was very popular where he was born and raised, and then
Yeah.
he came out here and he had quite a following on Facebook.
yes,
So
yes.
we kind of maintained that Tony
Yes.
Tuesday
Celebrity.
because
Yeah.
people were following him from
Right.
the zoo he came
Right.
from. So
right.
and we do get that sometimes if
Right.
an animal is popular enough,
Right.
they'll follow him from facility to facility,
Right.
and we'll even see people come next summer saying, "Yeah, I miss him so much at our
Yes.
facility. We just
Oh
wanted to
my
see him
gosh,
again, see how
yeah.
he's doing here."
Right. Is there an animal that's more stubborn than others?
I was gonna ask the same thing.
Oh yeah. Zebras are very flighty. Every animal has its own personality. Zebras tend to be very flighty.
Really?
Stubborn wise.
So,
Yeah, who's got the most attitude? That's
so
what I
like the
want-
zebra's
yeah,
like
yeah.
an airhead, like your haze
just-
over there.
no,
run
they're
away.
just
Oh, they're just like skittish. Like
well, it depends on the situation. I mean, the reason I say it, we've been trying to move them from what we call North Africa to South Africa, and they're just constantly on alert every time they see a staff vehicle out there right now.
like oh these guys again.
So it's a
Yeah.
challenge.
Right.
But if one of our antelope have a baby out there, all of a sudden they go from this flighty animal to this animal that's now there's something new out here, and we've had them kill other animals here in the park because they're an
Yeesh.
aggressive. Zebras are an aggressive animal.
Really?
We've seen them stomping baby geese out here. They've gone after other
I had
antelope
no
species, and so that's why we're trying to move them to the other
Really?
section because there's less of those opportunities for them over there. And
Did you know that?
I did not.
I didn't know
this.
that. I
I'm
learned
blown
something
away.
new today. I thought zebras were like docile, like
no,
horses.
they're on the high end of a dangerous animal for us.
Is there any? Do you have any like diva animal that everyone has to like?
wide receiver.
The snake that's always needs extra attention or anything.
Oh, that'd be our elephants. They're all
Really?
divas down there.
Yes.
They need to have their baths every day done. They get their toenails trimmed.
They need to paint.
Yeah.
They need to
Yeah,
paint.
they need
Yeah,
their
Yes.
artistic side to come out. Elephants know it though too. They know
They're
they're
smart.
Yeah,
they know where their
yeah.
staff are. We built this huge expansion, which is 3 more acres for them to run because exercise is important for them and their health.
Right.
But they see the staff person walking down by the barn and they run. Oh, there's a staff person over. They might have a treat for me.
Yes.
That's cool.
I love that.
If you could have a conversation with any animal here, which one would you have?
A conversation. Whew. I think I would pick probably some of the older, either an elephant again or some of the tortoises can live
Oh, that's
150, 200 years.
Stuff they've seen.
And so some of the things that they may have seen over their
Right.
time as a tortoise,
Right. And tortoises love bananas, right? That's a random.
they eat fruit. Yeah.
I think that's the only time I've like walked in the walk and I see them eating a banana. I'm like, that tortoise is really enjoying that banana right now.
Probably tries anything. I love it.
Yeah. So, other favorite zoos you've been to when you're not working?
I've been to a lot of zoos and I have a lot of different favorites out there. I
Yeah.
think probably the one I think about the most would be probably the Henry Doorly Zoo in Omaha, Nebraska. A, I've been there probably the most out of any other zoo. And B, they've just done a lot of cutting edge stuff over the last few years that have been kind of interesting and things we want to try ourselves and focus on. And so I think that's kind of my 1-2 go place every time I get an opportunity.
What would be those type of things that you guys, when you look at like, what you're talking about?
Well, one of the things that most attracted me most was early on, they had the concept that giraffe are, they're so tall, but any change in the topography. So if you paint a white line across their path into their exhibit, they're automatically going to sit there and go, I don't know if I can cross that white line.
Really?
It's like it's painted on the ground. You've crossed this 20 times, but now something's changed, so they won't cross that. So they took that concept, they built a boulder of rocks with a small fence. They actually didn't even put the fence on top. It was just a boulder of rocks because they knew giraffe wouldn't try to get up and over these rocks. And that was their barrier for their exhibit for years.
Wow.
They finally had to put the fence up there because the guests were constantly concerned about it. They had a few other animals that did finally manage to cross their barrier, and so they don't do that today. One of their barn design areas is rather than doing the typical concrete or dirt floor, is doing a what they call a carbon floor, which is taking wood chips, which Pacific Northwest is known for, all of our wood products here, and putting that in there. And so when they would defecate on it, you'd obviously pick up the manure part of it, but the urine and stuff would break down in the bacteria and the carbon base of the tree mulch that would be in there. And so they wouldn't have the ammonia build up. Oh. And it had another effect that they weren't anticipating, is the fact that the moisture in the wood kept their hooves softer, so they would wear down at a more normal rate. Wearing previously either on dirt or on concrete is either wearing down too fast or not wearing down enough, and we're having to do a lot of hoof work. And so now they kind of went with this concept, and a lot of other zoos have now followed suit on that.
Interesting.
Cool.
And there's some other things in there too, but those were kind of the major ones that I've always focused on.
I love that.
Why won't giraffes cross that white painted line?
Just a change in their atmosphere.
That is
the first giraffe I ever worked with. This was not here, but the driver said, this is our first giraffe. And I asked the driver, I said, do they ever back up? No, a giraffe never backs up. They got to see where they're going. Every giraffe I've worked with, when they enter a new situation, backs into it.
That's hilarious.
But they want to back into it so they know where they're going to run. If they get into a situation that scares them, they can see where they're headed. So that's my explanation for it. Is every new situation, I've always seen them back into it so that they can go forward.
So the flamingos can fly, right?
They can. They can't here. They're flight restricted here at Wildlife Safari, and that's pretty common in a lot of places. Right. So they, at a very young age, they've had a part of their wing removed so that they can't.
Yeah, I'm like, how do those flamingos just stay in there? Now I know. All right. If you can invite 3 people to dinner, dead or alive, who would they be?
I read that question. I read that question. I thought about it. And I was like, I think one would be Darwin, obviously.
Oh, good one.
Why did he write what he wrote when he was really only on the Galapagos Islands for like 2 weeks.
Yes.
And so these were all based off of a 2-week observation. So why did you write what you wrote with a 2-week observation when we spend so much time in a lab studying
for 2
stuff?
Weeks?
Yeah.
He writes a whole book about it.
And it's become a very integral part of what we do today. And so I think it would be interesting to have a conversation with him. My maternal grandfather, I think I would love to. I mean, I knew him growing up, but he died at a young age for me. And now that I'm an adult, it would be fun to go back and pick his brain on some of the things that he did back then. And the third person, I don't know, 2 was hard enough.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. Folks that want to get maybe to where you're at, maybe want to work in a zoo or want to work, with accredited wildlife, what kind of path do they have to kind of take to kind of get,
That's a good question because it's a challenging one. We're a small field, so that's number one. 2, if you're passionate about it, is do everything you can to get your foot in the door. So become a volunteer at those facilities, join the education program, make yourself known at those facilities. Obviously, education is important. So get a degree in a zoology, biology, whatever related field, and start working towards that. And then, like I said, just develop those contacts, the experience, because that's what's going to be crucial in getting into the field down the road, because it is such a small and very competitive field. It's not a very glamorous one.
Right.
It may sound like fun. We get to do but that's a lot of years of experience that I'm going off of from the stories we've told today. Yeah. Most of our job is pretty mundane, picking up poop, cutting up produce, feeding diets,
Yeah, but you get to work with animals all day.
We get to work with animals all day.
Me and Mark, we work we're in banking. I mean, talk about not glamorous. We know about not glamorous. If people want to get involved with just wildlife safari in general, or how do they contact?
They can contact us. Our website, obviously, we are hiring for our summer season now. So if especially young kids that are working age want to come out and have a summer job, now's the time to apply, because we are already doing interviews for our summer season. Our volunteer program is, we've got a volunteer program. We have a docent program. Docents meet regularly on a Monday morning, tend to be an older generational group. Doesn't have to be. There is no age limit on it, but they meet on Monday mornings, and then the volunteers can come and go as they please, and we try to match them as best we can with maybe interests that they have here in the park. But cool. Those are always open, and they can go to our website as well and apply there for those positions. But they will have to go through an interview process. We'll have to get to know them as well.
Yeah. That's awesome.
We do offer internships for kids that are in their junior and senior year of college as well. So that gives an opportunity to actually get out with our animal care force. And we do that. We actually do 4 seasons throughout the entire year. So we do a summer, winter, season of internships here. And that's pretty robust as well. We get kids from all over the United States that come through our internship programs.
I bet. That's awesome.
Well, before we ask our very last 2 questions, is there any advice or not advice? Is there any words of wisdom or things you want the general public to know about wildlife safari and just general care of animals?
I think the important thing is, sometimes zoos get a bad rap for being, keeping animals captive. And they really need to understand that these animals become almost family to a lot of our staff. And, when we go through births, it's a celebration. When an animal passes away, and all the animals will, they all live and breathe and get old just like humans do. We mourn, staff will cry, and that can be some of the most difficult times we go through in the park. And so it's definitely, when we talk about animal welfare, we're very passionate about that. And, we may not know how to verbalize that all the time and put it down on a paper for evaluation, but it is something that is part of our core of what we do here as an animal care and a keeper. And we do take that very seriously.
All right. And now we're down to our last 2 questions we ask everyone.
Go ahead, Mark.
Favorite sandwich?
I'm a meat and potato Dutchman, so my favorite sandwich would probably be a hamburger.
Wow. Good answer.
It's a fantastic answer.
Great answer.
And being a dairy farmer, it's got to have the cheese on it.
But what did you call it?
Meat and potatoes?
Meat and potato Dutchman.
A meat and potato Dutchman.
I say that because I can track all of my lineage back to the Netherlands. All of my family have all eventually come over from the Netherlands. Okay. Great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents.
Okay. So best burger in Roseburg then, or Douglas County?
Best burger in Douglas County. Wildlife Safari has a pretty good burger.
Good answer. I love it.
Oh, way to sell it. All right. And then favorite movie, non-animal and an animal.
I think probably my favorite movie, if I'm going to sit down and binge watch a movie, probably the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Hey, you got fancy.
Yes. Yes.
There it is.
Yeah. Perfect.
And then do you have a favorite animal movie?
What was that one about the zoo in Europe that they I bought a zoo or something like that? That was a pretty good one. Dan, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Folks, if you want to get a hold of our show, you can just email us at OregonFilesPodcast@yahoo.com. You can download us anywhere you get your podcasts. Mark puts it on YouTube. And on our Instagram page on Oregon Files Podcast, there's a link on our bio that you can just take it to all the directories that you can listen to all your podcasts. So again, thank you so much, Dan.
All right, thanks.